For the past 2 months, I think, I was working with something called Pattern Lab. It was for one big project for my company. I can't talk about that project, but I can talk about Pattern Lab and what it's used for. So Pattern Lab is actually an application, let's call it that, for organizing your modular designs, actually your modular markup and CSS. So it's based around something called Atomic Design by Brad Frost. And this is what atomic design is in a nutshell. So you would have something called atoms, molecules, organism, templates, and pages. And you can have atoms. So atoms is something like this. So it's just a button, just an input field, or just a label. Then you would have molecules where you would put those atoms together. So you would have something like this search widget. Then you would have organisms where you would put those molecules together. So you would have a logo, you would have a menu, and you would have this search widget. Then you would have something called templates, which puts all of those organisms together, and you would have full pages. So that's atomic design in a nutshell. But I have to say this, you don't have to use Pattern Lab just for atomic design. You can use it for any kind of modular design, so BAM, SMAX, whatever, to create modules for your site. So CSS and HTML modules that you would just put together and create pages out of those. So as you can see, it's primarily used on big projects, especially where you have, let's say, 2 or 3 front-end developers, and they all need to know how the header looks like, how the button look like, how the forms look like, and they can just copy that markup from Pattern Lab and put it and make pages out of it. So this is the way you would use Pattern Lab and atomic design or any kind of modular based design, but you can also use Pattern Lab however you want. In this episode I'm going to show you how to install Pattern Lab and how you would use them. So we are going to do some basic usage of Pattern Lab, and in the future, if you want to know more, I will maybe make another episode about it. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, let's go to Pattern Lab IO, and as you can see, this is their page. You have documentation here and so on. Let's just go down here to downloads, and as you can see, you have a few editions of Pattern Lab. So you have this PHP edition with the mustache as a template language, Twig edition, Drupal edition, Thin edition. We are actually going to use this Node version, and we are going to use Gulp edition because I like Gulp more than I like Grunt. So I'm just going to click that, and it takes you to this GitHub page where you have your installation manual. So how to install Pattern Lab on your computer. So you can download a pre-built package. If you do that, you just go to releases, and if you don't want to use git clone, and you just download this zip file, unzip it, and then run npm install. But we are just going to clone it. So I'm going to copy this. So you have to have git installed on your computer for that. And let's see those installation options. So you can download a pre-built package or use npm. We will just go and follow these instructions. So I'm just going to go to my console, and I'm just going to do git clone, so Pattern Lab edition node gulp. Okay, now that this is cloned, we need to get into this folder, edition node gulp, and this is our Pattern Lab. So before we do anything, we actually need to run npm install, so that because this is a node edition, it's going to get all the dependencies that are needed for working with this Pattern Lab. Okay, so now that the Pattern Lab is installed, what we need to do, we need to run the Pattern Lab server. So it has a server that is going to open up a URL on your machine, and you can actually see what's going on in Pattern Lab right there. So to do that, you just run gulp Pattern Lab serve. So gulp Pattern Lab serve, start it. And now it opens up this page for you. As you can see, this is where all your components should be. As of right now, we don't have any components or modules or atoms, molecules, and organisms. So we are going to create some. And to do that, I'm just going to go to my code editor. And I'm just going to open it up in Sublime. So this is how the Pattern Lab looks like. So you have this public folder. So whatever you do in this source folder is going to get compiled and put in the public folder. So this is actually coming from that public folder. So Pattern Lab actually just compiles your mustache files, so it's templating language, your mustache files, and put them in this public folder, just like pure HTML. So we have annotations, data, meta, patterns, CSS, and JS. So you would put your CSS right here, as it says right here, so your styles here. You can add some JavaScript if you want, and you have these patterns right here. So let's create our first pattern. So I'm just going to create a new folder and call it atoms. Okay, so now we have atoms. So in atoms, let's create a button. So I'm going to create a new folder and call it buttons. Okay, now we have buttons right here. And now in that buttons, I'm going to create a file called buttons.mustache. Okay, and now we have this. So if I go to Pattern Lab and refresh this page a few times, so it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you should just go right here, do Control C to exit out of Pattern Lab and run it again if the refreshing doesn't work for you. So now, as you can see, we have opened a new instance of Pattern Lab, and now we have atoms right here, and we have buttons, and you have a button. So if I click on it, there is nothing here because it's empty. We didn't do anything with it. So what we can do, we can create a button. So we do something like this. I am a button, and save it. And if we go right here, as you can see, it refreshes automatically, and now you have I am a button. Okay, so this button doesn't look like much. So let's add the class of button. Okay, save it. And in our style CSS, we can do something like, so Helvetica, Arial, and sans serif. So if I save this, this font should change. Okay, and let's now define styling for our button. And it's going to be a block, actually inline block. And it's going to have a padding. Also, it's going to be red. And the color is going to be white. And let's edit a border radius of 5 pixels. Save it. And now if we go to the page, as you can see, this is a button. Also, I'm just going to remove all the text decorations from links. And now we have this kind of button. Let's just add a text transformation right here, so all the letters will be capitalized. And now we have a button. Okay, so you can go to atoms, buttons, and see how the button looks like. You can also click right here and click on show pattern info, and then you would get the mustache version of that button and HTML version of that button. And you can also add some annotations right here if you want to leave messages for your fellow front-end developers. Okay, so as you can see, this is pretty easy to create. Now, the thing is, you may not have just one kind of button on your site. You may have a few versions of a button. So maybe you would have a green button. So how would we do that? Well, first of all, since we are using mustache as a template language, let's add a mustache tag right here and call it modifier. Okay, so we have a modifier right here. This means that with a JSON file, we are going to add some modifiers right here, so that we can, for example, change the background color. You can also add something like a link right here. And also this text, right? So you have this markup right now. Also, what you can do, you can add it, so buttons won't always be links, they can be actual buttons. So instead of A, we could write something like button right here, right? So let's change this to be a tag. Okay, so we have a closing and opening tag, text, modifier, and so on. Okay, now if I save this and go to this page, this is what it looks like. Of course, that's not good for us. We want to see the actual button. So to do that, you would create a JSON file called buttons.json. So I'm just going to create that file right now. So this is actually the power of Pattern Lab. And right here, I'm going to set some JSON data. So first of all, we need a tag. As you can see, we need a tag right here. So I'm just going to create a tag. And it's going to be a tag. Okay. Next, we need a link. Okay, next we need a modifier. We are not going to have a modifier for this one, so you can leave it out. Then we need a text. Okay, and we don't need anything else. Okay, save this. And now if we go right here, we should get our button with message of hello. Now, let's talk about those variations. So as I said before, you could maybe have two buttons. You could maybe have a red button and a green button. So what you can do, you can create another JSON file, call it buttons, and then you do a tilde sign. So buttons tilde, and you name your variation somehow. So in our case, it's going to be buttons green. Okay, now you have this other JSON file, and I can just copy this, paste it right here. But in here, I'm going to add this modifier, which is going to turn my button from red to green. So, and that modifier should just be a CSS class in our case. By the way, you can call these data attributes whatever you like. So I'm just calling it modifier because it makes sense to me, but you can call it whatever you want. You can call it a class, a style, whatever you like. So, and I'm going to call this button green. Okay, save it. And now if we go right here, let me just see, we still didn't get that green button. Let's try to refresh the page a few times. Okay, so now you have buttons, which is this one, and then you have buttons green. You click on it, nothing changes because we didn't set a style. So if you take a look at this code, as you can see, it says button green. Okay, so that's okay, but we still don't have styling for green buttons. So I'm just going to go to my style.css and create button green. Okay, save it. And now we have this green variation of our button. If we click on buttons, then we have this red button, and if we click on buttons green, we have this green button. But as you can see, you only have one markup for it. So you don't have to create another markup for a different button. You can just use these JSON files. Also, let's take a look at something else. If I click right here and click on show pattern info, you get this mustache, okay? And now you get HTML. And as you can see, this HTTP looks a little bit screwed up. So to correct that, whenever you want to escape special characters and so on, you would actually use 3 curly braces right here. So it's good that you put it right here and also on the text. So you may have some special characters on the text, or you can even have HTML for this text. So by doing these 3 curly braces, then the HTML would be escaped and displayed on the page as it should. So let's just save this and take a look at it now. Now, as you can see, we have http google.com, hello, and everything works okay. Okay, so now let me show you a little bit more of the power of using mustache and JSON files. So let's create another atom, and we're going to call this one lists. Okay, and in lists we're going to add a new file called lists.mustache. Okay, and we are also going to create a lists.json file. Okay, so now we have lists mustache and lists JSON. Okay, so in the list, I'm going to add the UL tag. So you can do it like this, of course. Save it. Let's see if we got our lists. Not yet. Let's try to refresh it. Okay, so now we have lists and we have lists. And as you can see, we have John, Mark, and Jane. Okay, so the power of mustache and JSON is that you don't have to have this at all. So you will have only one li tag, and in the list you do this. So I'm going to create a list data. It's going to be an array of objects. Okay, now we have our list JSON file. What we need to do next is create some kind of a for each loop, which you can do with mustache by doing just this. So we called this array list. So I'm just going to do this. So you put this pound sign right here and do list. And to close a list, you would just do list. And now mustache is going to go through all this data and find these objects, and then it's going to add a name right here. So instead of John, we're going to add name. And that should actually be it. If we save this and refresh this page, we get the same thing. But if we look at the pattern info, you can see that the mustache looks like this, and this is what you get from the HTML. So you don't have to write all the lists right here, you just write this one line and then you do this so-called for each loop. So since this is based on atomic design, you can do some other stuff with it. So as I said, organisms would be a collection of atoms. So let's try to create that. Actually, not organisms, but molecules. So let's add another folder and we're going to call this one molecules. Molecules. And now in those molecules, I'm going to add another folder and call that folder button list. Okay, and in that button list, I'm going to create a file called button list mustache. Okay, now we have button list mustache, and of course we need button list JSON. Okay, now we just do this. So we are not going to copy all of this from the list, also from the button. We can just do something like so this is the way we would call that buttons atom right here. And now let's call our list atom. Okay, so now we have those two atoms. But if we go right here, try to refresh it. As you can see, now we have molecules. And if we click on button list, we get nothing because we didn't define them in our JSON file. So what you need to take care of or look at is this. So we're first calling a button. So we're going to define a button right here. Okay. So now in that button, we can just copy everything that we have in this buttons.json file. It's going to be enough for the button. And we also have lists. So we have this list right here. So I'm going to define that. And inside of our list, we have a list. So I'm just going to copy all of this out and paste it right here. Okay, now we have a list with names. Of course, you can change this data if you want and save this. If we go to our site right now, you can see that we have hello, John, Mark, and Jane. And also if we check out pattern info, you get button list. The button list pattern contains the following patterns: atoms buttons and atoms list. So it already knows and puts this annotation right here for you. And if you check out the mustache, you get this. And if you check out the HTML, you get this. So it's a really nice way to organize the components that you are going to be using on your site. There's a lot more to cover, of course, about Pattern Lab. If you want to know more, go to their site and read the documentation. But for now, I think this is a good place to end this video, and I think we covered enough of the Pattern Lab for you to get started on creating your own patterns and using them for organizing those patterns and creating the pages for your website. So as I've said, this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, like it. If you like this channel, maybe subscribe to it. Also, if you want to ask me questions, you can follow me on Facebook or on Twitter and ask them there, and on YouTube, my site, and so on. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.